Hey monsters, thanks for tuning in to Murder Murder News, the true crime cult for the latest breaking news, murdery memes, TV reviews, podcast recommendations, and all things spooky. We want you to join our commune. It's going to be pretty awesome. Imagine a farm where baby goats run around as we sit around in a circle and share our feelings about our favorite true crime TV shows. Does it get any better than that? If your answer is no, come join us. I'm television's Aurora Katie.
And I'm Angelina. Cults are no fun alone, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell all of your true crime friends. This is the Week in True Crime.
Murder, murder, news.
We have new details in the murder case of pro poker player Susie Zhao, whose badly burnt body was found at Pontiac Lake Recreation Area in Oakland County, Michigan on July 13th. A word of warning, the details of her murder are gruesome. Susie was sexually assaulted with a large object and then tortured before her death. Her body was bound with zip ties and then set on fire until she died. Police have arrested and charged 60-year-old Jeffrey Morris with first-degree premeditated murder. Authorities describe Morris as someone who has been known to have been homeless and living on the streets. He's also a convicted sex offender who has been on the Michigan registry since 1989. Jeffrey Morris has been connected to the crime by cell phone records that place Zhao and Morris together at a motel in Waterford the night before Susie's murder. The nature of their relationship and reason why they met up that night is unclear. Also unclear is a motive for the crime, or if it is at all related to Susie's profession. Morris was captured on surveillance videos on the night of Susie's murder at both the motel and the park where her body was later found. Police discovered a baseball bat with blood on the end of it and bloody bed sheets in Morris's car. After a decade of living and playing poker in LA, Susie Zhao had just moved back to her parents' place in Michigan to resolve some personal challenges. Susie has been described as having no enemies and getting along well with everyone she met. Jeffrey Morris has been denied bond and will be back in court later this month.
On Saturday, Shannon Ryan was arrested and has since been charged in the kidnapping case of 21-year-old Leila Cavett. This story started on July 26th when Layla's 2-year-old son Camden was found wandering around alone outside of an apartment complex in Miramar, Florida. Authorities attempted to find Camden's parents using social media, and they soon realized his mother Layla was missing. Layla's family said she would never leave him alone and she was still breastfeeding him. Police found her truck on July 28th in Hollywood, Florida, and placed it under surveillance. Shortly after, Shannon Ryan approached the truck with keys for the vehicle. According to Shannon, Layla drove down to Hollywood, Florida to meet him to sell her truck for $3,000. He said they had known each other for a while and they met at a gas station for the sale of the truck. He said Layla next left for the beach with Camden and several men in a dark sedan. Surveillance footage does not show Shannon's gold Lexus at the gas station, nor the car that Layla supposedly left in around this time. Additional surveillance video near the apartment where Camden was found shows Shannon's car in front of the apartment complex in the minutes before a woman found him wandering around. Video from the gas station shows Shannon's car leaving around 8:15 a.m. in that morning and returning at 8:38, which is about the time the child was found. A gas station attendant remembered seeing Shannon and reported that he had used the dumpster at the gas station. Women's clothing, along with children's toys, were found in the dumpster, but it's still unknown whether these clothes and toys belonged to Layla and Camden. Shannon's debit card history, plus surveillance footage and receipts, showed he made purchases for hefty, strong, extra-large drawstring trash bags, 2 boxes of extra-strength carpet odor eliminator, and a roll of advanced-strength duct tape the morning Layla went missing. Shannon made a Facebook post on August 9th claiming that the trash bags and duct tape were used to cover a window in the truck Layla supposedly sold him that had been smashed. After searching Shannon's property, police found a shovel with red droplets and bleach. A week ago, Shannon posted a strange message about Layla's disappearance to his Kundalini Yoga Facebook page, basically stating he doesn't know anything more than what he's telling the police.
Today, I want to talk about Leila Cavett, or Cavett, who she is, and what my connection is to her. You know, Layla's missing right now. And I just want to say this. Why is it the only connection that you made between me and Leila Cavett is the one that I posted?
There are still quite a few unknowns to this story. It's still unknown why Layla left her uncle's house in Dawsonville, Georgia, to drive down to South Florida to meet Shannon. She hadn't mentioned selling her truck to anyone in her family. We also don't have any answers about what really happened to her on the 26th. We'll be continuing to follow Layla's story on MurderMurder.news, and we're still holding out hope that she'll be found.
This week, we're watching Teenage Bounty Hunters on Netflix. This lighthearted, satirical show follows the adventures of teenage twin sisters Sterling and Blair, who accidentally find themselves in the role of bounty hunters with their newly adopted mentor, Bowser. The show is definitely a bit cheesy and mindless, which kind of makes it the perfect palate cleanser after you've just finished watching All Be Gone in the Dark and need something a little lighter. Check it out now on Netflix and let us know if you've been watching in the comments below.
We are so excited to have Alvin with us from this week's favorite podcast, Affirmative Murder. Affirmative Murder is the podcast trying to bring equality to true crime. And every week, Fran and Alvin tell each other murder stories involving minorities. Alvin, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm great, Aurora. Thanks for having me. It's really cool to be here.
Well, I know that you recently had coronavirus. And
Yes.
myself and the whole true crime community, including Esther Ludlow, I even talked to her about your situation.
Love her.
She's just the greatest. And we've been so worried. We've all been sending healing vibes. How are you doing now?
I'm doing great now. It was not a fun time, but once you get on the tail end of it, you get a new respect for this whole thing because you just are going off of what you're hearing on the news, and you know, some people don't believe it's real and all these kinds of things. But then when you go through it, it's not like a cold or the sniffles. It was not a fun time. But now I feel great. I went out to the store and didn't almost pass out because at a point it really kind of ebbs and flows. So there was a point where I thought I was healthy and I tried to make dinner for my fiance and it was like I did a ultra marathon.
Well, Alvin, I love your dynamic with Fran. I love your banter. I love listening to you guys. I'm a huge fan of the show. I was
Thank you so
wondering,
much.
how did the two of you meet and what inspired you to start a true crime podcast?
Me and Fran met in the 6th grade in after school detention. I can't really remember exactly why we both were in after school detention, but I like to think of it as fate. And we've been best friends ever since then. And as far as the podcast goes, we were both fans of My Favorite Murder. And I was a fan first, and then I was, as a dude, when you get into that world of murderinos and everything, you feel weird sometimes talking on the message boards because you don't want to come off like you're hitting on anybody or anything like that. So I was like, well, if I introduce my friend to the podcast, I can talk to him about it, and then I don't have to feel like a creep or something like that. So I sent him some episodes, and he ended up liking it. And there was an episode that they did where they were discussing a Black woman who died in a jail or something like that. I can't really remember the specifics, but they were very much like, we're being cautious as to how we approach this and how we speak about this because we're not Black and we don't socioeconomics. And I was like, well, we can talk about that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
why should these things be not being talked about because of who are the dominant voices in the space? You know, it's like, well, if everybody's like white and they're afraid to approach the subject so the subject doesn't get talked about, it's like, that's a weird reason for a subject not to get broached. So I said, I hit up Fran and I was like, man, you want to start a podcast? You want to start a true crime podcast? And if anybody's listened to the podcast before, Fran is very much like, oh, yeah, all right, cool. So that was his response. And the next week I got one microphone and the rest is history. We started the podcast in 2017-ish, maybe 18, around Halloween, and we've been going ever since.
That's great. And I love that you guys just kind of jumped in with not even knowing if it was quite Fran's like thing, but you both took the leap
Yeah, I was
of
like,
faith.
you're doing it. So we'll figure it out, you know. And like, I have a background, and I've done stand up, and I've had and I've been a class clown my whole life. I like to perform. That's not really Fran's bag, but his progression as we've gone along, just throwing him right into the frying pan. I've been really happy to see his progression and him getting more comfortable and coming out of his shell a little bit. And that part of the dynamic, I think, really works because Fran is very real. He's not. We're not like two guys being like, "Hey, welcome to a podcast." You know, we're not doing the broadcast voice and all these kind of things. Fran is just doing his thing, and I am somewhere in the middle of that, and it's been working for us.
That's great. And so what is your origin of true crime? What got you into it in the first place? Was there a murder in your hometown? Or was it just always on TV as a kid? Like, when did you first realize this was your thing?
The very first time, there's a house it's been torn down now, and we actually ended up doing the story, which is very interesting on the pod. We actually ended up doing the story on the podcast, which is kind of full circle. But when I was a kid, there's this road called Pulaski Highway. It's like this major road. It goes all the way through Baltimore, and when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Burger King. So there was a Burger King, and then there was this house that was like abandoned. And one day, my mom, you just kind of go, why is it? Because it's a road where there's like, it's next to a Dunkin' Donuts, and then the Burger King I was obsessed with, it was across the street. And there's no other residential kind of setup. It's just this abandoned house. And I was like, what is that house? And my mom told me that was a palm reader. He lived there. And she got beheaded in 1994. And when you get told something like that as a kid, you're like, what? You know? But she was I can't remember her name right now, which is crazy, but she was a palm reader, and a guy believed that she put a hex on him, and he came in one day and he beheaded her. And hearing that story, you're just kind of like, what? And so that stuck with me for a really long time, and to be able to do the research on it and really learn the ins and outs, as opposed to it just being this creepy house that you ride past all the time to go to Burger King, to get the official story as an adult. But it was always in the back of my mind, and it led me in other directions to learn about the psychology of killers and why people do the things that they do. So that was kind of the catalyst of my interest. And then I took a psychology class in high school and was introduced to Criminal Minds and things like that. And that's when it kind of blossomed more into an actual interest. But that murder itself really stuck with me. And then you ride past the house all the time, so you always remember that story, that it like that folklore of this house where this woman was beheaded stuck with me, and then it led me in the direction of being interested in like actual true crime stuff. But being from Baltimore, it's a very, The Wire and these kind of things. So true crime specifically wasn't until I got in high school, but you're always interested in just like the criminal justice system and what the amount of years you can get for this crime and all, just things like that. So it's all an amalgamation of all those things.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the perfect formula, because I feel like growing up in the 80s, there were so many movies that had the haunted, abandoned house, and the kids are going on rocks at the windows. And I grew up
exactly like that.
Right? And like, I always wanted that, because I grew up in kind of like a newer suburb in like small town Ohio, where all the houses were built in the 70s. And like,
so no old creepy house with a weird story. And,
and I always wanted that. And like, when you think about it, it's terrible. Like this poor woman like was beheaded out of all things. But like as a kid, you're like, that would have been the
and then the part of the of her being a reader, it added this spooky element to it. But that stuck with me very, very deeply, because again, it was just in such a specific area where you're gonna ride past this house.
Right.
to go do anything at the point in my life that you had to ride past this house and you go, that's the house where the lady was murdered. And then you get a little bit older, you start driving, your friends start driving, then you ride past it, you tell them about it. What? That's crazy. And it just always stuck with me. But they recently tore it down. So that was an interesting time. But there's a video of it. Dan Bell, he's a guy who's done some videos on YouTube and things about Leakin Park, where the Adnan Syed case was very prevalent in there. He did a tour of the house because the door got kicked in or something. And seeing him walk around the house with a camera is very chilling.
100% looking that up after this and posting it if we can, because that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's like a weird HGTV.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, you've covered so many great cases. I really loved your episode on, recently you did the Mississippi burning murders. I really loved also your Black Famous episode where you covered Omaima Nelson. Out of all the cases you've covered, which one has been your favorite to research so far?
Honestly, we haven't even done it on the show, but I'm really obsessed with this whole Samuel Little situation. I mean, I don't want to cover it until the detective who got him to make all these confessions, maybe, there's a more of an interview of him and really explaining what it's like to be in the room with this guy. And the reason I'm so obsessed with this case is because he's kind of the king of what we've been talking about more so recently, but always throughout the podcast. If you look up Black serial killers, it's less of a case of, they're incredibly sneaky or higher intellect or anything like that. It's just that they exist in these spaces where addict shaming and sex worker shaming and the stigmas that come along with that, and just being in a predominantly Black low-income neighborhood, there's really no rush to solve the case or get help the response times in these neighborhoods. So you deal when you're dealing with like the story of like Anthony Sowell or the Grim Sleeper or Samuel Little. You're talking about these guys who've killed like 30 plus women, but it's not because they're doing anything fancy. I mean, most of the time these women are sex workers who these men internally hate in some kind of way, and sleep with these women, lure them in with promises of the drug of choice that they are addicted to, and then just kill them after having sex with them, and then leave them with no worries, really, because they're like, nobody's looking for this person. And then when the person gets found, the officer, which I'm not here to tell people, demean people's jobs or demonize people, but a lot of the times there's so many cases piled up that they go, oh, this woman's a sex worker, overdose, or hazard of the job. So open and shut case, unsolved crime, and these people continue to do these things. But a white serial killer can't exist in these spaces because they stand out. So Samuel Little, his numbers, I mean, he went all throughout the country to these low-income neighborhoods, sleeping with these, with sex workers or women who are, not in the best place in life, nobody really cares. So he was able to kill, I mean, they've confirmed like 50 of the women that he said he killed, and he said he killed like 90 of them. But he's not Hannibal Lecter or anything like that. It's more of these serial killers that we deal with on our podcast are more of a symptom of the socioeconomic space that these people exist in, and it really is you really can see the remnants of what the crack epidemic did to a lot of these neighborhoods. And it plays a major factor in what the situation is in these neighborhoods and why there's not a high response time, and why these women of that, because of the numbers he was able to do. He's like the ultimate in what it's like when people don't care about what's going on in these neighborhoods.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's been my biggest fascination as of late.
Yeah. And I can't wait for you to cover it because it's such a good one. And like being somebody
him drawing I mean, it's insane.
The drawings are like definitely one of the most standout things about his case for me. Like they're just so creepy and haunting. Like it's hard to even look at them. Like you can just see the fear in what
him
he's
remembering. Even like there's something sick about him being able to put pen to paper and draw a redhead from 1975, or some woman from DC 30 years ago. There's something so creepy about that.
Yeah. And, like along the lines of what you're saying with media coverage, like me being a big true crime person, I didn't find out about him until recent years. And I definitely had this wrong impression that all serial killers are white men. And there's part of me that's like, well, yeah, like white cis straight men are the fucking worst. but it's just not true. And like the problem
Yes.
with that misbelief.
Men are the worst.
Yeah.
just men. Just men in general.
Oh, yeah. But like the problem with like thinking that is then there are these women that are not having their killer caught and they're not getting justice and we're not stopping it because people aren't paying attention because it's not a white woman who's being murdered. So I love discovering your podcast. I love discovering Fruit Loops. They're
Love them as well.
Great podcasts now that are covering some of these stories about marginalized groups. And like, I'm so grateful for that because I had this completely wrong idea for so many years. So please cover that case because I would love to know more about it too.
I am chomping at the bit. I could put together a decent narrative with the information that's out there, but I'm such a visual learner that I'm hoping maybe, a Netflix documentary or something can come out where you get that information that you can't really get from articles or, the limited amount of research that I can do. I've been learning from some really awesome podcasters. Laura Norton from The Fall Line taught me how to file a Freedom of Information Act request.
Oh.
I haven't done it yet, but I don't even know what really you can get from the Samuel Little case that you can't just get from a simple Google search right now. I don't know how much is available because it's such a weird time. Like he's already in prison for 3 murders. So he's kind of just, sipping on Capri Suns and just telling his story. But the numbers are just insane. I would love to cover that case sometime soon.
Awesome. Well, Alvin, it's been so great having you today. Can you let our viewers know where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, if you type in affirmative in the search bar on anything, we will be one of the top 2 searches. I mean, I don't know what it is about that word, but there's not a lot of traction on it.
Smart.
So we're really we're competing with like the Affirmations podcast, which is they like give positive affirmation. So after Affirm, if you go anywhere past Affirm, we'll be one of the first ones to come up. Our podcast drops every Monday. Pandemic or not, we've been trying to make sure we stay consistent through this whole crazy time. And Twitter, Facebook, our Facebook groups, it's cool. We have some really fun conversations and interesting conversations and serious conversations. I've learned a lot from being in that group just because as a man, true crime is very much a women's genre. So I've heard so many real stories from women about their experience, what day to day with, what they do to protect themselves and these very real things where you don't think about them as a man about, what time you go jogging or anything like that. So it's been very informative for me. And we're on Instagram too, Affirmative Everything. Just type it in and we'll be there.
Great. And don't forget to subscribe to Affirmative Murder wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode.
This week on MurderMurder.news, our intern, Latay, presents you with the 10 best horror movies to stream right now. We are all still socially distancing, and the only thing scarier than this mess of a year we call 2020 is these super scary movies that you can stream on a service that you're probably already paying for. Look no further than our guide to find your next watch, currently on MurderMurder.news.
We want to give you awesome murder merch. We want you to have this Murder Murder News tote bag and t-shirt, this Talk Murder to Me mug from Mug Matter Studio, a killer necklace from Forensic Miles, a Stay Spooky shirt in any size you like from Stay Lucky Boutique, this Son of a Witch zip pouch from Decali Shop, and a Good One and True Crime sticker from Lacey Olson. We want to give you this amazing gift bag with over $150 with no purchase necessary. All you have to do is go to MurderMurder.news to register your account and let us shower you with true crime presents. We will have 2 winners, one in the US and one in Canada, and we'll announce the winners live on our channel in October.
We love reading your comments, so long as you're not an internet troll. We wanted to thank Flygirl Bry for commenting about how much she enjoyed our guest Celine Beth of the Chosen Ones podcast.
We would also like to thank Cold Brew Barbie for commenting about the Chosen Ones and saying she would like to know what Lori and Chad thought when they woke up on July 23rd and the world hadn't ended.
Thanks so much for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below, give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends.
If you just can't get enough true crime, join our commune at murdermurder.news for our monster book club and cold case solving groups. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. See you next week.
Murder, murder.